All right. If someone were to describe you as their hero, what attributes would they highlight about you?
Wow, what a powerful question. If someone was to describe me as their hero, I believe that they would say that whenever they're in my presence, they feel empowered to be their full selves. And that while I have inspired them by example, I've never told them exactly what they should or shouldn't do. And I've always reminded them to trust their own inner knowing and to come back to themselves and to trust themselves and to take action from that place. So if someone was to describe me as their hero, it would be because they are so full of who they are, and I simply help them get to that place.
That's awesome. That's really, I feel like you've thought about that before.
I was just well, I coach clients, and it's just something that I tell them all the time. I say, listen, this is my perception. Here's what I've tried. Here's what's worked. But I want to remind you, trust yourself. If this doesn't work for you, don't do it. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. I've been in situations where I've been coached, and the coach has basically asked me to abandon my self trust in order to take their
Mm.
advice. And I think that's very harmful. And so I try to just not ever do that when I'm in that position and I have the opportunity to do something differently.
Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Take a Space Podcast. I am your host, Leah, and
Hmm.
Joy, and I am really excited to be able to talk to multiple people about being the jack of all trades. Some of us know only that phrase, the jack of all trades, but let's talk about the full phrase. The jack of all trades is a master of none, but better than a master of one. So, in this series, we want to talk to different people about what they do, their multiple passions, and how they go from one project to another while maintaining their sanity. So thank you so much, Joy, for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm so excited, and I would love to talk about the full quote and how it's time to stop throwing people under the bus when you don't even know the whole phrase. Because people like to use that idiom or that phrase. Oh, you don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none, as like a warning. It's a cautionary thing,
Right.
And a lot of times for multi passionates, they hear that phrase and someone's kind of throwing them under the bus a little bit and throwing a little bit of shade. But as you just mentioned, the second half is though oftentimes better than master of one, because at the time when that was coined, people were still living in like small villages. And so you would travel from town to town with your family and you'd be looking for work, right?
Right.
So let's say every town had kind of one of everything. You had your candle maker, your shoemaker, your milk boy. Like that was a time in which this phrase came about. So if you got to a town and they already had a shoemaker and all you knew how to do was make shoes, you had to pack your family up and go somewhere else and try to look for work. But if you
Mm.
happen to also know how to make bread, you had a better chance of being able to provide for your family because you had more than one trade.
Right.
And so it's really fascinating how so few people know that. I did my first keynote a couple like a years ago, and that was what I opened with. And when I said the full phrase, everyone in the crowd was like, oh, you can hear a collective gasp because that's how few people have ever heard it. So I'm so glad that, you're doing this and you're helping to break that stigma around it.
Yeah, because some people think that if you get into, and I'm sorry, before we jump into the rest of the conversation, please just go ahead and this is your
Okay.
time to introduce yourself to the audience and let them hear a little bit about you.
Okay, sure. So my name is Joy, and I'm a multi-passionate creativity mentor, educator, content creator, community builder, musician, writer, and the list goes on. I am a bona fide multi-passionate, and I came into the space where I began to coach and create content and frameworks for the multi-passionate community because I could not find any. And I had to filter so much of the business advice that I was getting through my own multi passionate spirit and make sure that it actually resonated with me. And I spent a lot of years spinning my wheels and kind of wasting a lot of time doing that. And so now, what started as a blog, that's how my business kind of started. I really wanted to have a way to express myself. And blogs are a great place to start if you're multi passionate because you can write about various topics and you can just get in the practice of putting work into the world. You don't have to necessarily niche down right away, which is exactly what I did. So my blog is called Joi Knows How, because I wanted to write about all the things I knew how to do. So it's very intentional. And I was like, okay, we're going to talk about plant care, like house, decor. We're going to talk about affirmations and this and that. And then eventually I started writing about being multi-passionate and creativity and the creative process. And I felt in my own energy, that's what I really wanted to talk about the most. And the reciprocation from my readers and my audience was validating that. That's what people wanted to hear about the most. That snowballed into a business because I wanted to do more than blogging. I wanted to figure out how can I connect with people and how can I help people. So I started coaching, and then that led to me creating digital content and courses. And now I have an ebook that's helping multi-passionates make peace with focus, which is a big one for us. And I also have a group coaching program. And my podcast, the Multi-Passionate Mastery Podcast, will be coming out later this year in December, I think, when this airs. So those are all the things that I'm doing, and it's all in service of celebrating multi-passionates. The world is ready. If we can accept that there are introverts and extroverts and everyone has an equal playing field, the world is ready to embrace that there are specialists and multi-passionates, and we can all have an equal playing field. So that's the mission that I'm on.
Well, that's great, especially in today's world where we were in quarantine. We're still in a pandemic. Some of us are still in quarantine, but we have this great pivot where now a lot of people are being entrepreneurs. And it's like, well, what niche do I have? Well, I know how to do a lot of things, but I'm not specialized in one or two specific things. So, how has being a multi-passionate helped you, especially in these last couple of years with such a shift of people leaving the 9 to 5 or corporate world to pursuing their own passions?
Yeah, being multi-passionate, if you are going out on your own and kind of figuring out how to do this without that consistent paycheck or without a 9 to 5, being multi-passionate is a huge advantage. I actually recently left my 9 to 5 in February of this year, so
Oh,
not
wow.
that long ago. And I personally believe that when you have what I call a support job, when you have that full-time income, that can also be really powerful for multi-passionates because it allows you to try things out and take risk without financial stress. So if you do have a 9 to 5 that isn't totally sucking your soul dry and you can figure out how to do things on the side, more power to you. I don't ever shame anyone for staying in the workforce. I think it's sometimes the smartest thing you can do. However, if you are wanting to leave and do your own thing, being multi-passionate is a huge advantage because a lot of times when you want to create that bridge income for yourself,
Mhm.
having some services that you offer, that tends to be the quickest way to make that happen. So for an example, I'll use myself as an example. I really consider myself a mentor, an educator, and a content creator and a writer, like business wise, right? And a speaker, kind of that's like my vibe. But I also love graphic design. It's one of my
Mm.
passions. So I do my own website design. I design all my own graphics on socials. And occasionally people will say, like, hey, who did your website? And I'm like, I did my website. And then they say, oh, do you do that for other people? And I say, actually, you know what? I don't advertise that publicly, but I'd love to help you with that. Or I don't advertise that publicly, but I'd love to create some content. So I have a client right now on a monthly retainer, and I write copy for her and I create Instagram posts. I don't talk about that everywhere because I don't want to have a fully client-based business, and that's really not where I see myself headed long term. But I'm happy to do it kind of on the low, on the underground, right? And have that other stream of income. So as a multi-passionate, that's the advantage that you have. You don't have to go all in. And this is contrarian advice, right? Because there's someone else who would tell you you can't do what I'm about to tell you that you can do. You don't have to go all in and go all the way to the end with something. You can do something for just right now if it's going to serve its purpose, and then the season can change and it can be over and you can move on to something else. You absolutely do have the permission to do that. And you can choose what you talk about publicly, what's kind of your secret underground things that you do. I call them like secret side hustles. You get to choose. But when you're multi-passionate, you have a little bit more to work with. And if there's those things that you do for yourself that just comes really, maybe your inbox is just so organized, for example, right? Maybe one of your passions is really being able to organize files and folders, and it comes naturally to you. There are people who that's their worst nightmare. And you could make an account on a website like Fiverr, and you could put a profile up that says, I will organize your inbox, and I will clean up your Dropbox, and I will clean up your Google Drive. This is how much I charge. And you could just do that on the side while you're working on maybe, getting your voice out there and growing your audience. And no one has to know that you're doing that. It's not a big deal, right? So a lot of people don't talk about that, but that's one of the main advantages. So I'm so glad that you asked that question. And with the internet and with websites like Fiverr and just sort of these ways to get connected with people who have a need that you can fill, it's easier than ever before to do that.
So it sounds like there is a major advantage in pivoting. So when there's issues with, whether it's income based or passion related, or not really feeling motivated in the season that you're in, or with what you're doing, like, oh, I'm really bored with this, I really want to do something else, there seems to be, it sounds like a flexibility that multi-passionates have that some others don't have. I mean, granted, not everybody wants to pursue 5 different passions at the same time, or where they stack and just like, well, for the next few months in this season, I'm going to be focusing on graphic design. Well, then I want to learn how to do interior design, or maybe I want to work on writing. And just because you accumulate all these skills doesn't mean that you want to specialize in all of them or do all of them at the same time. A lot of the conversations that I have when I talk to people who have a lot on their plate, or who I consider jack of all trades, some people may look at that and say, well, where's the focus? How do you stay focused? How do you know that you're doing a good job in what you're working on at this point? So I'll ask you, how do you focus when you're working on one passion or another, and how do you know that you're doing a good job in that role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to actually go back to something that you mentioned in your example of someone who maybe starts off with graphic design, but their real kind of long-term passion is getting into interior design. And how amazing is it that they work so well together, right? Because if you start with one passion, what tends to happen for multi-passionates is it's not that we're going to pivot in a way where, okay, well, I'm completely done with that and it will never arrive again, right? Even as an interior designer, you might create a digital mock-up of the space, or you might create a mood board, and your graphic designed eye can make it a really beautiful experience for your client, versus someone who has never dabbled in graphics and might need to hire that out, right? So there's
Right.
so many advantages to understanding that even when we do transition from one season of focus, which is what I like to call these seasons, these kind of silos, if you will, when we do transition, we take everything we learned with us. We're not like always starting over. Sometimes it is just starting over if we're doing something completely new, like, let's be real, but we take a lot of knowledge with us. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think that's something that we don't always realize. We think we're starting over, but actually we have so many more skills than we did before. Now, how do we know? How do we stay focused if we have more than one thing going? Maybe we are, doing kind of a fun bag of things right now to make it work until we can get to a place where we're only working on 2 or 3 projects at a time. And how do you know if you're doing a good job, right? That's such a beautiful question. So I'll answer them sort of individually.
Okay.
How you stay focused, in my opinion, and I talk a lot about focus in my work. How you stay focused is you set very clear expectations for yourself. And it
Hmm.
doesn't need to be complicated. This can be very simple. So something that I tell my clients is create an intended outcome for the week. It can really be that simple. So if
Okay.
you are, I'll use myself as an example, since that's what I have the most experience in, is just being myself, right? So, um, I have a client who I'm doing content creation for, and it's been a while since I've had a client on retainer like that. So I had to kind of get back into the flow of like giving her deliverables and going through, the draft process and getting back into that. So my intended outcome for the week might be I want to get my system set up so that I know once I have all these graphics done exactly how I'm going to turn them in, exactly how I'm going to receive feedback. And so, what focus looks like for me at that time is I'm creating a Google Drive folder. I'm making sure that I'm naming all of my files. I'm setting up a Voxer chat for us, and we're doing that. And then I can check that off. Setting that up leads to success for the next intended outcome, which is okay, now that I have that set up, I'm ready to design my first batch of graphics. I need to get some feedback and make sure I'm on the right track. So my intended outcome for that week is I'm going to block off time on my calendar. I'm going to put on some really good music, light a candle, get the vibe going, and I'm going to create. Right? I'm going to create some graphics, and I'm going to do this many assets. So sometimes it's taking a larger goal and looking at the smaller parts of it and then
Right.
just saying, okay, if my ultimate intended outcome is to have a super happy client who wants to work with me again and again, how do I reverse engineer it and get closer to that step? Right? If the approval
Right.
process
Right.
is a hot mess and she doesn't know where to go to find her content and I don't have a good feedback loop, she's not going to be happy. So when we can just take those small steps and simplify a little bit, it's really easy to know if we're focusing on the right thing. And staying focused is easier when we have a specific outcome that we're working toward. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's
Okay.
like microtasking your way to success.
Yes,
Where,
exactly.
yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And it helps
Yeah.
because if you have a clear goal, you have a real way to reach it. So is it measurable? Yes. Did we hit it? Yes or no? Is it a real goal? Is it this arbitrary thing? Like, how can we figure out how much time is it going to take? If you set up those
Mm-hmm.
types of clear goals, then you're able to actually see, okay, is this what I wanted to do? Maybe I need to
Mm-hmm.
change my tactic.
Right. And with focus, sometimes what will happen is we'll get to a place where we're like, okay, great, I want to have this intended outcome, but we'll find that we're doing tasks that have nothing to do with it. So, also
Hmm.
setting up that intended outcome helps you stay on track and stay focused because when you look at your list of tasks, your more tangible list of tasks, you
Hmm.
can ask yourself, are these tasks leading to my intended outcome? If they're not, then it means that, and I love to say this analogy, it means that your priorities are becoming like tectonic plates beneath the earth and they're just starting to shift ever so
Mm.
slightly. And if those shifts go unnoticed and unmonitored, you won't be prepared for the earthquake, which is when your priorities just get totally thrown out of whack and then you can't focus as well because you literally don't know what's going on. And that can happen real quick for multi-passionates. So
Hmm.
I want to give your listeners this process that they can use if you're in a place where maybe you have a couple different things going on or you're trying to figure out like what to start with and where your focus should go.
Okay.
So it's called intensive focus and I teach about this in my ebook, which I'm happy to give you the link to if anyone wants to check it out. Intensive focus is the first part of the 3-part focus framework that I teach about, and it's this big picture zooming out energy. And I like to think of it as it's like setting yourself up for a conference of one. This means that you are going to block off some time. I give myself like 1 to 3 hours. So you're going to think of this as you're taking a morning or you're taking an afternoon or you're taking an evening to yourself. You got your snacks, you got your water, you got something that you can write on and dream on, like a nice blank whiteboard or a blank notebook, your stickers, your highlighters, all those things, you have those, right? And you're going to have an intensive focus session. You go into this space knowing that you're going to come out with massive amounts of clarity and that it's going to set you up for success when you are doing quote unquote the work, like actual work. And the reason I say that is because sometimes when I talk about intensive focus, it feels like, oh, well, isn't that just procrastinating? Like I'm just staring at my vision board and thinking about my big picture goals, but I need to put some work in. And I say, yes, you do need to put the work in. That's the next part of my framework. We talk about that. But without clarity, What happens is we sit down, we start working, and in the back of our mind, we're going, should I be doing this now or could this wait? Or is there something else I should do? And that actually hinders our focus in the moment. So we want clarity first, action second, right? So this intensive focus session, this conference of one, you got your stacks, you got your space. I like to go outside where there's, a nice open space that I can think more expansively. That can also be really supportive. And this is the time where you get to draw a graph on your paper. And on one side, write down your current priorities. On the other side, write down your commitments. And then look, do they match up? If you have commitments that don't align with your priorities, now you get to say, oh, interesting, there's some things I'm going to take off my plate, or I'm going to pause on this and I'm going to move this to next month. Or you know what? I need to have a conversation with that person because I can see that this is actually going to distract me, even though I was so excited about it at the time. My priorities aren't aligned with this commitment anymore. And for multi-passionates, just taking that time. I do this, Leah, I do this every Monday. Okay. Every single Monday, I'm like, I need to have intensive focus time. And I do this. I look at all my projects, I look at what's on my plate. And in addition to that, in addition to this kind of review and this big picture, zooming out and looking at everything that's happening, making sure that you're aligned and that your priorities are not shifting right under your feet. You also, during your intensive focus session, take time to anchor back into your why. Why are you doing all this? Especially if you're in the place where you are doing a mix and match of things, and that can become a little tiring at times, right? So, why? What's the ultimate goal? And I don't just mean an income goal, I mean the vision for your life. What are you doing now that's setting you up for later? What's your big why? And anchoring back into that will really, really support you as well. And then from that place, once you have your clarity popping, you know why you're doing what you're doing, and you're feeling really anchored into your mission, chances of you crushing that to-do list the next day are so much higher than if you don't take that time. So I had to give that to your listeners because I think it's one of the most powerful practices that a multi-passionate person or someone juggling multiple projects can do. Yeah.
Thank you for that, honestly, because there are people who try to figure out what is the best way to plan for a successful week. I know that I have to make room for life, but how can I set an intention? Even if the intention is small, I'm going to complete whatever the small task is, whether that is meal prepping, whether that is making a phone call, setting up an appointment, or putting gas in your car because you've been procrastinating for 2 weeks. Whatever it is, like setting that goal, no matter how small it is, right? And then achieving that, then we can have a snowball effect of like, oh, I can accomplish stuff. Let me do some stuff. So I think that's really good, and I like that you are anchoring this back to your why. We do gain a lot of different skills, and I call them transferable skills. As someone who helps people prep for interviews and someone who helps people learn how to talk more positively about themselves, working in that space as a coach, I started to try to help people. Hey, these are called transferable skills. Yes, you learned them when you were at your quarry job and now you work at a bank. Well, those people skills that you learned are still going to be necessary for when you start doing sales at a bank, because you still have to learn how to communicate with people. It's going to be a little bit different, but those skills still transfer. So looking at those skills as transferable skills, whether you're working in the music industry, or if you want to go into the writing industry, or if you want to go into the cooking industry, the food industry, or hospitality services, like all those skills are transferable as long as you intend to use them. So I think that's really great. But what I've found is that a lot of people, and I don't know how many there are because in my circle, we try to make sure that we have a plan, but there are a lot of people who are so short sighted that they don't know their why. They're just doing stuff because it's Tuesday. Or they're like, oh, this is trending right now, or this is hot right now. Like, why were there so many people who were going to law school or who were going to medical school and either dropped out or became one in a number? And now you can find almost an attorney on every other corner because everybody was like, well, that was the hot ticket. That's where the job market is. Like, I'll go there, but now you can't find work. Or some people wanted to teach or go into finance or whatever the case may be. So, how do we take time, or how do you take time to sit down to understand your why?
Literally, intensive focus sessions is how I do it. Exactly what I just expressed. It's not just having actionable tasks on my calendar, it's having time to reconnect with my vision on my calendar and setting aside that time and protecting that time and showing up for that. Just like I show up for an interview, a conversation, writing my blog post, putting my content out, I'm also going to show up for having that intensive focus session where the only agenda is reconnecting with my mission, looking at everything that I have on my plate, making sure that it's still what I want to do, and giving myself full permission to pivot if it's not. That to me is sacred. Now, if you're asking more tangibly, like, what practices do I have that help me stay connected? I have a vision book. So I used to do vision boards for years and years and years. And then, you take them down and you make a new one, and then it gets kind of like in your closet. And it's really fun to pull them back out. You're like, oh my gosh, I did this and this and this, right? But over the years, I sort of grew out of having a vision board that's just always out. So I now do a vision book, and this has been really fun. So it's a book. It's super thick. I have a really big one, so it'll be interesting if I ever fill it up. But I sit down and I add to it on a consistent basis. If I ever feel like, okay, why am I doing this again? Or what is my big goal here? I will go back to my vision book. I'll look at the pages I've already made, and then I'll start a new one, and I'll put images that speak to the lifestyle that I'm creating. I want a peaceful life. I want to have land. I want to be able to garden. I want to be able to travel. I want to know that, yes, I am helping people, but I have a lot of time to rest. I'm not on this go, 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 super high energy lifestyle, because that's really not my vibe. I like to chill, so I put those images. For me, I'm very visual and I'm a specific manifester. So I don't know if you know human design, or if anyone knows about their human design. There are specific and non-specific manifestors, and you can find that out by looking into your human design, which I will not go down that rabbit hole because it's really deep. But I'm a specific manifester. So for me, looking at actual pictures, like if I want a new couch, and that's part of my, like, okay, well, if I want a new couch, I need this many dollars. And so I'm going to make sure that I have a powerful launch because it gets me closer to having that couch. And it seems so like, oh, but that's just capitalism and materialism. But if having that couch makes me feel more peaceful when I'm at home, and I feel more peaceful, that has a ripple effect on how I communicate to my partner, how I show up for my clients. It all matters. So that's the other thing, is not belittling your desires. If saving up for a new couch is what's going to get you out of bed, then that's totally fine. It's not always going to be altruistic and I want to start a foundation. Like, that will come. It's okay to take care of yourself first, right? So if you're not sure what your why is, and you are like what you said, hey, it's Tuesday, so I guess I'll do these tasks. Just think about, what are your desires? That's a great place to start. And let go of, it's selfish for me to want things. No. Here's the thing. When we think like that, it's because we're not thinking about the values that thing is attributing to. So me getting a new couch means I value my environment. I value feeling nurtured. I value creating spaces that feel safe and comfortable. Those are values. The couch is a couch, but it's not the couch. It's the value that's attributed to it. So if you're really just like, I don't really know my why, and everyone talks about it, but I'm not sure, just start with, what do you desire? What do you want? And it can be something as simple as, I would like to move into a bigger apartment. Okay, great. That will get you out of bed. Like, let's work toward that. Let's work toward that. Let's work toward visualizing yourself, putting in your notice, getting accepted, packing your boxes, like, getting that space that you want, because it's not an apartment. It's where you're going to go, where you're going to create, where you're going to experience what it's like to be you, right? So
Absolutely.
there's so much more to some of our desires, but we don't always let ourselves go there. But would you say it's the same for you? Like, if you're not connecting to your why, sometimes just thinking about, like, okay, well, what is it that I want? I find that that's really helpful. It's a simple way to do it.
And yes, I think that whenever I get into this mode of, oh, I feel like I'm all over the place, I'm doing all this work, and I'm maybe concerned about productivity or the quality of work. And then that's when it helps me, like, okay, why am I doing this? What is the goal? What is going to help me get back focused? Where did I lose focus? So I can go back to that place and retrain myself. Okay, if I get here again, I know how to get back focused, because this thing kind of rocked me a little bit. So maybe I'm off track a little bit. So let me get back to what the plan was or what the path was. Or maybe I need to sit in that space and look around to see, because there may be something else that's calling to my attention, and that's why I got knocked off track. And if that's the case, I need to figure out what's happening there, maybe focus on something else, because something else is taking precedence over what I'm doing. So that's how I try to stay focused. Like, even for this podcast, I tell people initially, like, what we talk about, what we do, it's about owning the space that you occupy and learning how to be more self-aware, knowing yourself so much that when you show up, people know you're there. Like, you don't have to shrink yourself for the sake of other people. So every conversation that I have with guests who are coming on the show, I let them know, like, that's who we are, that's what we stand on. And just reiterating that is manifesting the podcast to be what it is. And so that's why I can appreciate having these types of conversations, to understand, well, I may meditate in the mornings, and that helps me get on track. You having your Monday conference one-on-one times to intently focus on what you're doing for that week is helpful to you. It's not one size fits all where you have to do one thing to be successful, because as we've seen in the last 20 years, there are multiple paths to success. And unfortunately, and you brought this up, unfortunately, a lot of people have been told by the prior generation, because that's how they operated, that if you don't produce anything that is of value, you are essentially worthless in the community. And that's not always necessarily true, because if you can't find value in yourself, then no one else is going to assist that in the value. But if you assist you in finding your value in the community, but if you produce something, whether that is help making children smile, whether that is being a listening ear, or knitting, or starting a book club, or whatever, just because it may not get you a six-figure salary does not mean that you have no value. Just like the couch situation, the couch could be $3,000, and some people are just like, I would never spend that much on a couch. But it's about what that couch brings. It's about what that person brings into the community, what they do in the environment, how they help other people flourish. It's not just about the one person. So whenever anyone enters into a conversation, a community, a job, what have you, it should be about how you are able to connect with yourself, anchor in your wants and desires, and influence that community, influence that conversation, influence the other person, or inspire them to make them be more of who they are. And it will, honestly, some people are not ready for this, it will highlight flaws. It will absolutely highlight flaws, but it only highlights flaws to convict you, to help you to be better. So I wholeheartedly agree that it's important to connect with your why, and not put your value your in a dollar amount of what you produce. Don't worry about producing X amount so that you can get to millionaire, billionaire status. If that's what you want to do, then do that. But understand that you cannot attach your value to the dollar amount of what you bring to any community. But then
Yeah.
that also brings me to a point that you made that I think is very important. I want to have you expound on this a little bit, where people belittle their own desires and successes because of what the community has deemed. Because I feel like everybody has their own community, and it may not be the one that you grew up with. So with the internet, we can go and find our own community. But what have you experienced, or how have you helped to assert your value in the community that you have grown as following with your books, with your coaching and your other side businesses, even your secret businesses? How have you made sure that you protect what your value is?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question because what I don't teach is here's how you can make $10,000 in 3 months. I'm not teaching money, and I have found that the coaches who get the most success the fastest are the coaches who are going to teach you how to make money, because everyone wants to make money.
Everybody
So
wants to make money.
everybody, right, with a beating heart, most people, there's a small percentage of the population who's like, I don't care about money, but most of us know we need it to survive. And
Right.
especially as a woman of color, it's about legacy, right? It's not just about my money, it's about creating generational wealth that I didn't
Right.
come from, but I have the opportunity to change. So I'm often faced with this question of what is my value and what value do I bring, because I'm not a money coach. And so, when someone enters into my program, if you look on my group coaching sales page, it says I'm going to work with you to help you unlock unapologetic self-acceptance, unapologetic focus, and help you craft your unapologetic offerings that you can put out into the world. Nowhere on that page does it say, and you're going to have you're going to know how to make this much money. And so I'm teaching a lot of times what I call the intangible skills,
Right.
life skills, confidence, how to show up as a multi-passionate and be empowered by who you are and be unapologetic about that. What does that look like? What can that lead to, right? Can it lead to multiple income streams? Absolutely. Can it lead to money? Absolutely. But that is the white dominant culture, capitalist way of looking at value, in my
Right.
opinion. And I'm not available for that, because there is so much more. And I would rather someone feel unapologetic, empowered, know how to set boundaries for themselves and all of that, so that when that money does come, they know how to have that income support their lifestyle and who they already know that they are, versus making a bunch of money and not even knowing who you were before you had it, and now you're in an identity crisis and you're almost wishing you could go back and do it all over again. So the way that I assert value, or the way that I think of the value that I bring, is sort of like what you said about the hero question. If someone in my presence feels empowered to be themselves, their full selves, to me, that is the most valuable thing I can do for anyone else. So when I receive videos, or just a couple weeks, someone sent me a video and said, hey, I took your advice that you said on Instagram stories, and I just want to let you know, in case no one's told you, what you're doing matters and you've changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, to me, like, is there any more powerful measure of value? If I can initiate someone into a new perspective, that's enormously valuable.
Absolutely.
So that's how I think about value. And I do in my intensive focus, when I'm in those sessions where I'm just thinking about what I'm doing, when I look at my why, and I look at my vision book, and I look at the lifestyle I'm creating, it isn't just material. It's also, when I look at that, I can feel how I will feel at this sort of almost like arrival point, where I can look around and go, I remember dreaming about this, and there's a feeling there as well. And it's a feeling of knowing that I've made an impact in people's lives. It's an undercurrent knowing that I have created value by leaving an impression, by saying phrases that people remember and then they go repeat to someone else. That's how you change the world. So that's how and it's hard to answer that in a really concrete way because it's sort of it's like a more esoteric approach to it. But that's really what I think about in terms of value. And it sounds so cheesy, but if I can change one life, if I can touch one person and then they can go and support someone else, then to me, that is extraordinarily valuable. And from that place, the other goals start to materialize as well.
Yeah, and it's doing the, as I listen to the points that you brought up on your website of what you offer, it's almost up to the, what's actually is, it's up to the client or the potential client to make the connection of, how would I use this in my everyday life? How would this make me a better person? How could this open up doors for me? And I'm sure that you discuss those things, but making sure that success is framed in a way that makes sense for you is probably one of the most important things anyone can do for themselves. Just because your parents or your coach or even your manager could say that success is XYZ, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, yes, success may be hitting 10 referrals or having 5 sales, but let's be real, I didn't curse anybody out today, so I think I'm doing pretty well. It could absolutely be that. So I wholeheartedly agree that we have to measure what success is for ourselves and stick with that, honor that, so that we're not killing ourselves in more ways than one to reach the success of somebody else when we already have our gold. But they're like, oh, you can do better than that. I don't want to do better than that. This is the platform I want to be on.
Oh my goodness, Leah. I cannot tell you how many times someone has said to me, you're so much more than just digital products. You can do so much more than just help multi-passionates. But it's like, that's cool. And thank you for the compliment. But this is what I have chosen.
Right.
And for me, supporting multi-passionates and feeling empowered, that's big. That's not
Right.
little for me because it's my personal life purpose. I'm fortunate in this lifetime to have stumbled upon my purpose. And
Mm.
that's my purpose. And when you find it, there will be people who will challenge you because they might have a different idea of what, like you said, what success looks like
Yes.
or how you should go about fulfilling that purpose. And people love to tell you how you should live your life, although they're not in your body living it, right?
Right.
So I think it's just so important to always remember, like you said, that we get to decide. We get to decide what success metrics looks like. I sent out an email, and I'm going to make a note of this because I want to actually add it to my welcome series so that everyone will get it. But it's called Unconventional Success Metrics. And I go through and I say, I tell a story about how I completed a course and I was asked to come and do some coaching as an alumni for students who are currently in the course.
Mm.
And so when I was given that opportunity, they emailed me and they said, and can you also let us know some of your success metrics, and we can put that in the email, for example, like how much you made on your last launch and this and this and that. And as soon as I saw that part, I was so excited. I was like, yes, I want me to do this. What a dream come true. And as soon as I saw they were asking me for success metrics, my heart started pounding and I started to feel anxiety in my body. Because I don't define success the way that the coaching industry does. I have a different,
Right.
I have more unconventional success metrics. So I actually went for a walk. I didn't reply to the email. I went for a walk. I needed to move and just breathe and get some air and come back to myself. As you say that you really support, your clients and knowing how to do. I had to come back to, okay, who are you? Like, don't let that email intimidate you. You know what success means to you. And I came back into that, and then I responded to the email. And I said, I get this many people have responded to my welcome email and opened up their hearts to me. This many people have done this. I have successfully grown a community. I have transformed the way that my community approaches being multi-passionate. And those were what I sent. And I felt so good, and I sent it. So I tell that story in an email that I sent to my list, and I got so many replies. I mean, people who were in tears saying, I really needed this today, because what I said at the end of the email was, notice none of those had anything to do with money. None of those were about a 6-figure launch. None of those were about any of that stuff, you know? And so that was just really, really powerful. And we need more examples of that, but you can be an example of that to yourself. So if that means at the end of the day, you write down your, what I call like 3 small victories at the end of the day, then do that. You know, I drank my water, I ate lunch outside, I smiled at a stranger. That counts. All of that counts. And it's actually a life hack, because when you do that, if you can do that right before bed, write down kind of your 3 small victories, or your 3 small successes, whatever you want to call it, you will wake up feeling very much more productive, because your brain doesn't know the difference between I've launched my podcast and, you know, I cooked all my meals at home today. If you're in the energy of celebration, your body's in that energy regardless of how big or small it is. So that's a really powerful way to train yourself to start to see, actually, I am capable, I am productive, I am producing outcomes, even if they are energetic, right? It's not always about these tangible outcomes that are measured in, you know, white dominant culture, that always have to have a dollar sign or whatever attached to them. So that's really something that I think is really important. And I hope that your listeners take that away from this, because the more of us who do that, like, that can change the world, truly, if we start to embrace that there's other ways to look at success. And even if we tie that back to focusing, right? How do you know that you are successful at focusing? Well, did you look at your planner today? Did you start your work today? If you didn't finish it, that's understandable. But if you got started, that's something to celebrate. Maybe you didn't complete it. Okay, no problem. What can you do to set yourself up for success the next day? Maybe you need to go to a coffee shop. Maybe it's not going to happen at home, right? Or maybe you like to work at night, but you feel guilty, so you're trying to force yourself to work in the morning. Try working at night, and let's just see how it goes. So there's a softness to that when you can be a little bit more flexible in how you measure personal success.
That was great. I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you so much for this conversation. I have truly, truly appreciated it. Now is your time to go ahead and plug anything and everything that you have coming up, so the listeners can be aware of who you are, what you have coming up, and they can be on the lookout for it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me, Leah. This was so much fun. If you want to stay in touch with me, you can head over to my website. That's my home base, and it's joyknowshow.com. Joy is spelled with an I, and there is a dash in between each word, and we'll put that in the show notes for you. If you want to learn more about my 3-part focus framework, so intensive focus is the one part that we talked about today, but it goes into a little bit more than that. So you can have a well-rounded relationship with focus as a multi-passionate, then you can look for my ebook, Finally Focused, which is really easy to find from my website as well. I'm on Instagram too at Joi Knows How. Joi Knows How. I'm on Instagram as well at Joi Knows How is my handle, with a period in between each word. And I would love for you to also just think about yourself in a way that's a little bit more of a curiosity about who you are in your relationship with focus as a creative person. And so I created a free quiz. It's called the Focus Style Quiz, and you can take that quiz and see what your unique focus style is, and you can approach focus in a little bit more of a playful way. So I also invite you to do that. And finally, lastly, my podcast, the Multi-Passionate Mastery Podcast, will be coming out this December, and the first season is all about focus. So if you enjoyed any of the conversation that we had today about that, I would love for you to check it out.
Thank you so much, Joy, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. Please make sure to go follow her at Joy Knows How. Please make sure to check out the website. Thank you so much for having such an awesome conversation with me about being the jack of all trades. I have been Leah. Make sure to follow us at Take Up Space Pod. That's Take Up Space POD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you'll be able to find the video version of this podcast on YouTube and just hashtag Take Up Space Pod or at Take Up Space, sorry, at Champions of Discourse. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a great day. Thank you so much, Joy.
Thank you. Bye.